Reddit, what's a time you saw in butthole kid get what they deserve? I was around 8 years old on a jumping castle and this random kid bounces over and asks how old I was. After telling him, he immediately started punching me in the face, and I ran away. I turned back to see if he had given chase, but instead he'd jumped off awkwardly and had broken his ankle. I laughed quite hard. Should have went over and punched him in the face. Payback. I was working at a Pizza Hut at the time. Some kid around age 10 or so went into the men's restroom and crap in the urinal and proceeded to smear it all over the goddamn place. We knew it was the kid due to it not being very busy that day, and a co-worker spotted the mess right after the kid left the bathroom. We weren't sure what to do, but the manager decided to tell the parents. The father was P. He made the boy clean it up. He stood over him yelling at him and made him clean it all. The boy was crying, but you know, frick that kid. He was old enough to know you don't do that crap. He wasn't mentally impaired. He was just in butt. We were all glad the dad stepped up. Otherwise we would have had to clean it. TL. DR. 10 years old brat smeared his own crap all over a Pizza Hut. His father made him clean it up. When I was in my mid-teens, a little neighbor girl about 5-6 years younger than me came to my door. She accused me of putting my name in her sidewalk. It had recently been done. Except, of course, that wasn't my name in the sidewalk. That not being enough, she then accused me of using a fake name in the sidewalk, so I wouldn't get caught. I asked her why, because that would defeat the purpose. To which she came up with this gem: "I'm going to tell my dad you hit me." No such thing had happened. Then she turns to run off and do just that. Right face first into the sharp stone stucco wall, splitting her lips, nose, and cheek open pretty bad. She told her dad I did it. He came to my door and calmly asked me what happened, and I told him, yeah, that's something she'd do. Sigh. I'm raising a gold digger, kid. I once saw a kid terrorizing a dog at a park. The dog was tied to a pole and the kid was chasing the dog around on his bike. The owner came back and started yelling at the kid. As the kid rode off, he popped a wheelie and the front wheel of his bike popped off midair and he did a face plant in the parking lot. I felt pretty bad for laughing but couldn't help it. It was so unexpected. You shouldn't have felt bad. Frick that kid. I was driving a fire truck back from an all-night fire about 7 AM. This truck's diesel mixture was a bit rich, so if you sat for a while and gunned it, you might get smoke from the exhaust. As I approached a highway from the residential street I was on, there were 6 middle school kids waiting for the school bus on the corner. As some kids do, they stand or walk in the street and refuse to move for cars. As I came to the intersection, one little crap looks at me smugly and does not move, causing me to have to go into the oncoming lane at the intersection. I patiently waited until I could make my turn onto the highway, then gunned the crap out of the fire truck's diesel engine, causing a thick blob of black thick smoke to come out the exhaust, which was mid-truck pointed right at the kids. They were coated in thick oily diesel fumes, especially Mr. Smug crap, and last I saw they were halfway down the block on the sidewalk running with me on the road spewing smoke after them. Mr. Smug looked at me with terror in his little half-developed mind. Mr. Smog. I grew up in a really small town where all of us kids went to school together K-12, unless you went to the parochial school, all through elementary school. This girl who lived down the street from me was a total B. She was taller than most of the boys, and would bully anybody she felt was beneath her. One day, coming home on the bus, she was picking on this boy in my grade. We were a year younger than her. He wasn't an albino, but pretty dang close white hair, really pale skin, thick glasses, and his parents saddled him with the name Clarence. Kid just couldn't catch a break. Anyway, this girl was leaning over the back of her seat and in his face the whole ride home, calling him names, making fun of his glasses, clothes, etc. A few of us tried to get her to stop, but she was relentless. Poor Clarence just sat there, his face getting redder and redder, the occasional tear sliding down his face. When the bus came to his stop, he slid to the end of the bench seat, calmly stood up and turned to her. Then faster than anybody could even take a breath, he hauled off and did a full arm swing and smacked her in the face with his lunchbox, his metal lunchbox. Then he just turned into the aisle and slowly walked off the bus. They say when an EOD has a bad day, he turns into pink mist. Her nose had a bad day. She spent the next 3 months with varying degrees of black eyes as a result of the initial injury and subsequent surgeries to repair her nose. That was the last time she bullied anyone. And the best part of the whole story is that Clarence never got in trouble for it. That calm rage. I know the feeling. Our neighbors have 5 kids. They're all brats, but the middle child, a boy, is the worst. He was in front of his house one day while I was outside doing some landscaping in my front yard. A shiny new red pickup truck drove by, then slammed on the brakes and started backing up. It stopped in front of the brat's house. I heard the lady in the passenger seat yell, "Did you just throw a rock at our car?" Of course the boy denied it, and started making up some ridiculous excuse, like he always does when people catch him making mischief. The woman cut him off and told him to go get his mom. Apparently the woman in the truck was from the neighborhood and was also fed up with their kids and their nonsense. The mom finally came out, holding the youngest brat, and the woman in the truck proceeded to give her the kind of verbal beatdown that the mom should have been giving her own kid all along. Watching that mom stand there and listen to some stranger rightfully criticize her parenting for 10 minutes straight was gratifying. The only thing better was watching the brat squirm the whole time. That sort of thing happened to my dad. It was winter, and this butthole kids from up the street decided to throw an ice ball at his new car as he drove by. He slammed on the brakes, drove in reverse and top speed and caught the sucker, almost running him over. He gave the kid a verbal throwdown and scared the shithead so bad. Never did it again. There was this kid who used to annoy me and my friend growing up. He was years younger than us and didn't just want to play with us. We played sports games with kids years younger than us. Age was never an issue for us. He just wanted to annoy us. We'd play all different games. Street hockey, baseball with a tennis ball or wiffle ball, etc. He'd constantly watch waiting for his moments to jump in and frick the game up. We tried ignoring him at first, but there's only so many places to play in our neighborhood, so we couldn't really go to too many other places to play. After a while, we realized ignoring him wouldn't be enough. He had too much fun with it. We started trying to annoy him back, throw the ball at him, stuff like that. He always laughed as he dodged them but would start wailing when we hit him. He went running home and his parents hated us. One day, his father finally walked up to us and told us to relax and stop bullying his kid, while the kid had that butthole grin behind him knowing he's screwing you over. The father was actually reasonable enough to say he doesn't know who's telling the truth because he wasn't there. He asked us to ask the kid to leave or at least go elsewhere. We would go elsewhere, but the brat would follow us and annoy us constantly. We kind of got to the point where, as bad as it may have looked, we'd do something to him. He'd run crying home. And then we'd leave to find somewhere else to play. After a while, we were playing something and he was there annoying us. His father drove by and happened to see the kid annoying us and slammed his brakes and just parked his car in the middle of the road. He absolutely tore into his kid. His kid was bawling his eyes out. His father made him apologize to us and apologized to us himself since he realized it was his kid causing all the issues. We never had another issue with the kid again. We'd all laugh whenever we saw him and he'd just get pee and run off to probably annoy somebody else. TLDR. Kid always annoyed us. Went to tell his parents that we're screwing with him. His father finally catches his son lying and annoying us. His father rips into him and apologizes to us. This story put a huge grin on my face. The little jerk off that pushed my daughter down and stole her pinwheel toy from her at the park completely biffed it into the slide running away. I chuckled. I won't even pretend like I didn't. Kid was there unsupervised and terrorizing the younger kids. I calmly walked up smirking after he was laying there a bit winded and grabbed my daughter's toy back from the ground beside him. A 10-year-old kid dumped a cup of water on my 18-year-old brother to show off for his friends. My brother responded by sticking the kid head first into an empty trash can. Except it wasn't empty. It had a foot of rainwater mixed with a decade of garbage drippings in the bottom. The can tipped, and the kid comes out soaked, wailing, and smelling of sewage. He ran home and never spoke to nor fricked with my brother again. For the record, if he knew the can was full of water, he wouldn't have dumped the kid in there. There was a kid in high school that was trying to rob an ice cream truck. The driver accidentally ran him over and broke both of his legs. Bangarang. I was working the shoe depot at Sears back when I was 18. One day this little crap kid is in there with his unattentive mother. He's running around, knocking stuff over, making a mess. I ask her to keep him in check and she refuses. The kid starts running circles around the register. Well, the register was on a little island in the middle of the depot and had a slide out shelf about waist high to an average person. I'm bringing up an actual customer, so I slide out the shelf and set this person's shoebox on the shelf. Little crap comes flying around the corner and wham! Forehead connects with the shelf and a loud butt crack. He immediately falls backward, blammo right on the floor, and then starts wailing. The mother gives me a dirty look and gathers up her brat, making her way out of the store. The customer and I both watch her go and then just sort of shrug it off. Worked in a pet store when I was in high school and we had a real issue with this particular family letting their kids act like dongbags all over the store. One fateful day, butthole family walks in and dongbag daughter goes right to the puppy room. Kids can't hold dogs without a parent and no one picks up a pup unless we are the ones to get them out of their little runs for them. Welp. Little Mrs. Wipe reaches in and grabs a pup by the leg and tried to pull it toward the wall of the run so she can lift it out. I see this on my CC monitor by the register and run over to stop her from hurting this puppy. By the time I get in, she has hoisted this dog up by one leg and nearly has him over the wall of the run. Mom and dad are standing right there, not doing crap when I walk in. Before I can get a word out, crappy daughter sees me and drops the puppy back into the run and turns around like nothing happened. I yell at the girl and her parents obviously get defensive and I offer to play back the tape of their daughter hauling a puppy up by its leg then dropping it 4 feet onto a tile floor. I tell them they need to go and of course they refuse. As I go back up front to inform the manager, I notice little Miss Fuckwit poking her fingers into the feeder rat cage while shaking it. The rat in that cage was a jumbo feeder and was separated from the other feeders because she had just had a litter of pups. Now, rat moms are good moms. They will protect their babies, unlike mice who give zero fricks about their progeny. This is important. Dickhole daughter has her finger in the cage and is banging on the opposite side when karma strikes. Mama rat is not having any of this crap and runs right up to this girl's soft, pink finger and bites down hard on the little crap's finger. All heck breaks loose because mama rat isn't letting go and rat bites blow. Parents freak. Manager tries to calm the situation, and I get a band-aid and alcohol for little fuckwit so she stops bleeding all over the floor. In the end, butthole family isn't banned from the store, boo, but stops coming soon after because idiot mom insists that the giant blue and gold macaw is friendly even though he isn't and gets her ear ripped up a good one. In the end, rat mom and babies get promoted to pet rats instead of feeders for their brave part in helping exact vengeance of donghead families with demon spawn. The blue and gold macaw was also rewarded for his part with many French fries. TL. DR. Rat and macaw avenge their puppy brethren from the bullshittery that is helicopter parents and their crappy children. Rat and macaw, wardens of the pet store, banes of little shoots. Tim was hit by a car and almost died. Broken bones, brain injury, and coma at the age of 9. He missed 2 years of school. When he came back, he joined my class. Mentally he was there, but not. Academically he was fine, but socially he had a hard time making friends. Had a almost non-functioning left arm, tremors, and a slightly different walk. Due to his left leg being shattered, it made him an easy target. One morning before school started, Jeff, who was one of the primary agitators, really lets into him. It was almost 30 something years ago, and I can't remember what set him off, but Tim grabs Jeff's neck with the bad left arm. We found out the grip was just fine, and took his good right and punched him in the face uninterrupted for a good 60 seconds. Being 2 years older gave him a distinct reach advantage. I wish this had an effect on everybody and they would leave him alone. I remember my 5th grade teacher shutting down class one day and chewing us out about Tim, but it did no good. It was back to normal the next day. Frick junior high. There's a reason I don't talk to those buttholes anymore. I wish I could tell you that middle school is better now. It's worse, I do not know how, but it keeps getting worse. Maybe locking all the children in the middle of the most violent and unremorseful time of their entire lives in one big building for 3 years is a bad idea. One day playing at the park when we were kids, my bratty neighbor decided to use her sharp nails to scratch the crap out of all the other girls. We were all under 10 at the time. I don't remember being scratched myself, but my sister had some awful red streaks down her back. My mom was livid and went to tell off the girl's mom about her daughter's crazy behavior. It turned into a shouting match. I guess my mom won because the other mom went into her house and came back a few minutes later with her daughter's nail trimmings. She gave them to my mom. Gag. You gotta have proof sometimes. I saw a kid being a dong to other children at the park. Even though it was an awesome idea to try out the baby swings, he got stuck and the fire department had to come and cut him out of the swing. Anytime you see a kid hurt themselves doing something their parent just finished telling them not to do, watched a kid slam his finger in a door just minutes after his mother told him to quit messing with it and sit down. I chuckled a little bit. Priceless. Had a punk neighbor, 12, that would consistently taunt and tease my little sister, 7. Neighbor boy decides one day to throw a small baseball bat size stick in my yard and tell my little sister to fetch. She surprisingly goes to get the stick, only to whack him across the face with it. She has learned well, to say the least. I once saw a kid run up to a man and kick him square in the balls. The man immediately dropped to his knees, then pulled a gun from his waistline and aimed it at the kid to scare him off. I'm not one to say that anyone deserves one thing or another, but I lived in a fairly bad neighborhood at the time, so maybe that kid learned a lesson about what might happen if you frick with someone. Honestly, knowing it was a fairly bad neighborhood, I'd be inclined to do the same. The kid could have been the first part of a mugging. As cynical as that is to say, I've seen gangs use kids firsthand, and they do it because they know the kid won't get in serious trouble. I went to see a monkey show in Thailand where the trained monkeys perform various circus tricks for tourists. Two 12-ish-year-old kids were poking one of the monkeys with a stick through the cage and their parents weren't taking any notice. During the show, the monkeys were performing a trick where they throw a ball to the audience and then catch it. The tormented monkey ran straight up to one of the kids and threw the ball point blank straight into his face. The monkey had a pretty good arm on him, enough to make the kid's eyes water and leave a red mark. Back in high school, there was this kid Andrew. He had Asperger's. He was a cool kid though. I used to talk Pokemon with him in art class. Anyway, one day after class, one of the football kids was being a prick and blocking Andrew from walking down the hall. He kept stopping right in front of him and making Andrew slam into his back. Right as I was about to say something, the football kid stopped again and Andrew lurched forward and bit the kid in the neck. The football kid screamed and Andrew took off running down the hall. I laughed my butt off for days at that one. Andrew used bite. It's super effective. My mom told me this story of when I was a kid. I think around 4 years old. I was at soccer practice and we got a water break. The team had ongoing practices for all age groups at the same time. Anyways, I was in line to drink water when an older, probably around 10, kid decided to cut in front of me. My mom said, and I quote, "You looked straight up at him and punched him right in the balls." The kid apparently fell to the floor and I walked right over him to get my water. I wish I remembered this. I wish this was recorded. A guy who used to pick on me real mercilessly in high school got busted for selling crack in the high school parking lot. Senior year. Far as I know, he's still in prison since he was over 18. Held back a few times at the time of the arrest. Right out of high school and to prison? Probably a bit harsh, but some would say he got what he deserved. Not sure if this has already gone metered or. I worked at Round Table Pizza one day while working the early shift. Me and another manager were standing at the register talking. This guy comes up and asks if we had seen his cell phone. His table was cleaned when he went up to go to the bathroom before he was about to leave. We asked the boozer if he saw a phone and he said no. I decided to call the phone from the store phone. When I called, the phone was answered and a female voice was on the other line. The conversation went something like this. Me. Hello? Her. You're what do you want? Me. Did you find this phone? Her. You'll give it back to you for $100. Me. Hold on a second. I hand the phone to the customer and all I can hear is hello. Yeah, okay, fine. He hangs up the phone and instantly whips out a knife and walks outside the store. Me and the other manager look at each other thinking someone is about to frickin' die. The customer was P. We walked over to the door and watched him just walk back and forth in front of the store. He eventually cools off and just waits by his truck. About 5 minutes pass and this teenage chick, she wasn't more than 18, walks up to him. She demands her $100 and he asks if she has the phone. She pulls it out of her pocket and is waving it around. He walks up to her and moved faster than I have ever seen someone move. He grabs her, puts her in a headlock and just starts punching her in the face. As he's punching her in the face, he is yelling, "Give me back my phone, B. Give me back my phone." She just throws his phone away from her and he just lets her go and shoves her away and just walks over and picks up his phone. At the top of her lungs she's yelling, "My boyfriend's going to kick your butt." The guy is walking back to his truck and he just yells back, "Frick your pee-butt boyfriend." Jumps into his truck and drives off, leaving the girl there with a stupid look on her face like she couldn't believe he drove off. Her face was all bloody and it looked like she had a broken nose. I about pee myself laughing so hard. Dang. What a dumbass trying to use blackmail. Hopefully she's a bit smarter now. Doubt it though. I played soccer my freshman year of high school, and my team was one of the better ones in our division. There was a team from another school who we had heard would always try and cheat their way to a win, faking injuries, trying to injure you when the refs weren't looking, etc. And finally we got our chance to play them. Their team was playing man-to-man defense, so the same girl was guarding me basically the entire game. Every time she would get close to me, she would dig her fingernails into my skin. So by the time we got to a break, my arms were completely shredded. I told my coach what was going on, and he went and mentioned it to the refs. They said they would watch out for it, but when play resumed, she kept right on doing it, and the refs continued to not notice it. Finally, I was pretty fed up. At one point, she came and stood behind me, but also slightly to my right. As soon as she reached out to touch me, I popped her in the stomach with my elbow as hard as I could. She of course fell to the ground and pitched a big fit, and they ended up stopping the game. When the refs came over, she was being very dramatic, rolling around and writhing in pain, and she told them this whole sob story of what had happened. I'm sure it did hurt a little, because I meant it to, but it certainly didn't hurt as much as she was making it seem. The refs went ahead and red carded me though, despite our previous complaints about this girl, so I went and sat up in the stands with some of the parents. By the time play resumed, she was magically feeling good enough to play again, except this time she was guarding my friend Kay, who is much more awesome and less patient than I am. This girl starts doing the same thing to Kay that she had been doing to me, but Kay only put up with this for about 45 seconds before she turned around and popped her one right in the face. The girl ended up having to sit out the rest of the game because her nose was bleeding pretty badly, and Kay was red carded as well and got to come hang out in the stands with me. It was of course awesome watching Kay punch the girl in the face, but the aftermath was awesome as well. But 1. We won the game. Actually, we beat that team every subsequent year of high school as well. 2. It was found out after the game that one of the refs was actually related to one of the girls on the other team, so they actually downgraded K and I's red cards to yellow cards. And 3. The next year when we played that same team, K managed to catch that girl's eye before the game started, and give her a really menacing look. We saw the girl go talk to her coach right after that, and she ended up sitting out that entire game. We never saw her after that. Oh, and we won states that year as well. If there's one thing I've learned about most girls' sports, it's that they play a lot dirtier than boys. Not necessarily cheating, but just so much extra violence. I had an answer to a similar thread that I think works here, so I'll just copy paste. When I was working at an airsoft field, we had parties coming all the time. One party, the birthday kid was being a total dong to his friends, shooting really close, not calling hits, and yelling that he hit people when he never did. So me and my co-worker had had enough of this kid being a dong. So we decided to let the boss son play. He's really competitive, doesn't really know how to take it easy, but on the opposite team. We told him to be really tough on the birthday kid for a game or two to teach him a little lesson. However, the boss son just went nuts after the birthday kid shot him in the back of the head really close. Typically, you tell someone to surrender and they just go back to respawn. Needless to say, the boss son get really pee and just lit the kid up point blank. Full auto. The birthday kid started bawling and the party left early. My boss just asked if he was being a LB. Little bastard. And when we said yes he just shrugged. None of us gave a dang. Looking back, I see a lot of my old high school bullies jocks are leading horrible lives of endless crappy jobs and pregnant, bitchy girlfriends. Anyone have any examples of real life bully karma? A kid that bullied me pretty mercilessly in middle school emailed me a while ago. He told me that a lot had happened to him that made him look back on his life. His fiancée had cheated on him while he was in Afghanistan and had been preventing him from seeing his children, etc. And he realized how cruel he had been back then. He apologized and, 9 years later, we met up, had a couple of beers, and established a tenuous friendship. Feels good. Nice. Seems like he matured quite a bit. Unfortunate it took some traumatic events to make it happen. The biggest bully from my grammar school is now an exterminator. 30 years later, he still can't pick on anyone his own size. That's practically poetic. One fellow who used to bully me all the time throughout the school wrote a long paragraph of apology in the yearbook and wished me luck. He is doing alright now. My old bully died in a fraternity hazing accident. I was picked on in high school by this guy, but joke's on him. He spends his whole day making stupid comments on Reddit. A fate I wouldn't wish on anyone. This varsity wrestler beat me up in his super senior year of high school when I was a sophomore. When I was a senior I took his little sister to prom. Got lucky multiple times that prom weekend, and a few times on his living room couch later. I don't know what happened to the bullies in high school cause I don't care about them. A lot of the bullies from my school became cops, mostly because the police academy at the community college was the easiest thing to get into besides the photography department. My mother did inform me I don't live in the same town anymore. That one guy that once broke a friend of mine's arm while waiting for the bus became a cop and recently tasered an innocent dude while he was having a smoke breakout behind his workplace. Now the smoking guy is suing him in the city for a whole bunch of money and will probably win. That's bully karma at its finest. Life unfortunately doesn't quite work that way. One of my classmates was a cheerleader in high school, then a cheerleader for a national basketball team, then in jail for something like domestic abuse. Another got into and attended MIT, dropped out, became a successful male fashion model. What's the point? High school is such an unstable time for folks. People tend to change a lot in the years following high school. As much fun as it is to see a jerk get their due, I think that people that look to see how their bullies turned out care way too much about what happened in the past. The one bully who terrorized me, but who was a gifted student, saw me in the gym and actually came up to apologize about the way he treated me in our youth. I was somewhat sad to find out he was working as a busboy because it seems like his intellect is being wasted. I accepted his apology but it doesn't make the memories go away. Grammar. Choose to remember your strength and adaptability instead. If you never knew how bad bullying made you feel, you might have done it to someone else. There was this guy, we will call him Jose, who was a big gangster in junior high and high school. He was already shaving and had a goatee in junior high and he had the pick of the ladies in the school. He was very cocky, rude to everyone, and just a general prick. I had him for a couple of classes but steered clear of him for the most part, but we knew of each other. Fast forward 2 years after graduation, I run into him at a Taco Bueno. He is working as a painter with a bunch of illegals and his face is jacked. He smiled and shook my hand when he saw me. Told me that after high school about 10 guys that he messed with all throughout school got together and jumped him. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital and had to go to physical therapy. That's some direct retribution right there. I'd say it's a 50/50 split. Plenty of the biggest buttholes grew up and got great jobs and make much more than you. The phenomenon you reference probably has a lot to do with the reasons they were bullying in the first place. They probably had all sorts of horrible fricked up crap happening at home, and bullying is the easiest way for an adolescent to pass on the pain and deal with it. Those sort of situations led to all sorts of issues that will ultimately sabotage their attempts to lead normal, productive lives. Sharing this with my 12-year-old son. I apologize for my foul language. My husband and I took a trip to TX to see his daughter from his previous marriage. On the way there, he told me about this one friend of the ex's family that used to hang around that I would meet at this little reunion. One day, husband and dude were walking down the sidewalk and happen across a cat. Dude picks up the cat by the scruff of the neck and body slams it to the sidewalk, then laughs as the poor creature writhes in pain. Now, my husband would never hurt a creature, but he also did not say anything to dude because my husband is small and dude was huge and also had a temper. Of course, I'm absolutely disgusted and I hate this man that I've never met. I'll mention that husband had not seen or heard from this guy in over 20 years, so this was a long time span. Turns out, dude was in a construction accident and hurt his back permanently. He is in constant pain all the time. He wears a morphine patch and probably takes a handful of RX painkillers, and maybe some that are not RX, every day to manage the pain, but nothing totally gets rid of the pain. That is sweet karma. TLDR. Dude breaks a cat's back for jollies, ends up with permanent back damage. I want to straight up bludgeon any people who hurt animals like that. During my elementary and junior high school years, a group of guys were relentless bullies, but one guy was especially horrible to me. They beat me up regularly and constantly ridiculed me for being gay. I wasn't out yet though, and for taking advanced math courses at the community college. I'm now 22 and graduated with a double major and double minor from a top university. Have a great job and am a proud gay man. He dropped out of high school, became a drug dealer and got arrested multiple times. To be clear, my upvote is for your success. Screw the bully. He never turned his sad life around, but you sir, are amazing. One bloke stabbed me in the chest because I'm a gay. He promptly died 3 weeks later. Drug OD they say. All the douchebags and bullies from my high school are now successful lawyers, traders, doctors. It would seem that bullying and being douches gave them the skills to step over people to get to the top. A good 50% of the girls in my graduating class were knocked up within a year of high school. I didn't really have anything against most of them, really, but holy crap are they stupid. Sounds like my hometown. So many stupid babies just waiting to be born. I was a bully in high school. Karma hit me with a rage problem by 23. I really gave myself a rage problem, to be honest. Although I'm clean now and I have an advanced degree and in law school, so meh, it comes around. I'm not in butthole anymore. There was this butthole a year ahead of me named Justin. He was an all-around dickwad. He once put a Ziploc bag full of vegetable oil in my backpack, which later popped open and ruined all my crap. Also the constant torment kinda sucked. 2 years ago, I was home from college for spring break. My great-grandmother had just died, so I was suited the frick up. I was also left her Mercedes-Benz, which I sold to help pay for my student loans. Couldn't afford the insurance taxes. So there I am, pulled into a Hess station in a black Benz E320, wearing a black business suit and a very nice silk tie. At the pump opposite me was this freaking douchebag, filling up a rusted out Monte Carlo wearing what looked like overalls. He'd seen me. I decided to be a dong. As I started the car, I rolled down their window and whistled at him. He turned around, and I gave him the finger and yelled, "Hey Justin, right here, buddy. It's my crowning achievement." When I was in 6th grade, a boy threatened to stab me with a box cutter in tech ed class. Of course the teacher didn't take too kindly to this and he was sent to the office and punished. The next day in school, his older sister, who was in 8th grade and twice my size, came up behind me in the hallway and shoved me. From then on she made fun of me, calling me ugly and a lesbian because I had short hair and played sports and video games. She was really preppy, shallow, obsessed with her appearance and had lots of boyfriends. I recall her and her friends playing with condoms in the back of the bus, if that gives you any idea of what she's like. I recently came across pictures of her on Facebook in a friend's album. She has gained weight and her eyes looked sad and dead in all the pictures. On the other hand, I went on to become a fairly successful model and am happy and confident in who I am. TLDR. Was bullied for being a tomboy. Got called ugly and dark a lot. I went on to model and she got fat. Nah, here's what I noticed. Alpha guys, jocks who were not charismatic ended up with sales jobs. The popular kids who came from well-to-do families are mostly in well-to-do positions of power and influence even if they were crappy students. The smart, nerdy kids grew into themselves and became successful, desirable adults. Some of them became knockouts, either in the looks department or career-wise. The dead-end kids, of which bullies share some overlap with, all have sad stories. Bad luck, karma, and poor choices conspired to put them in a place with a bleak future and an equally bleak present. Had one when I was younger. I was dressed up in a nice suit, going to my parents' country club for Easter brunch and had my girlfriend with me, who was pretty attractive. I was working and also had just bought a Eclipse convertible. Stopped at a White Hen to get a pack of cigarettes, and my biggest middle school bully was working there. He took one look at me, and then looked out at my car, top down, hot girl, and just shook his head. I paid and didn't say a word to him and left, but it was a pretty incredible day. This guy had made my life a living heck for 3 years before I left and got bused to a private high school 15 miles away in another town. TLDR. Saw middle school bully when I was high on life. Ultimate closure. Probably shaking his head at you driving an Eclipse convertible. Please tell me you took the next step and had your tubes tied. There was a bully at the high school I went to that seemed to get away with murder. This guy did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, to whomever he wanted, and I never once saw him get in any trouble. He and another of his little pack even jumped my buddy in the locker room once, and somehow my friend ended up with the suspension, while they got away scot-free. Anyways, fast forward about 6 years. This bully is still in our town, and from what I'd hear, still being in butt. He was driving home from somewhere one day about 5 AM, presumably fricked up as all heck. He still had somewhat of a reputation for being a hardcore partier. He hits an old man out on a jog and drives away. The next morning there is a story in the paper about a police officer, mere days from retirement, that was killed in a hit and run early the previous morning. The former bully gets caught because he was in his work van and tried to explain away the man-shaped dent in the front by saying he hit a deer. So when his boss is about to turn him in, Mr. Bully goes down to the police station in another county, where apparently his grandfather was some kind of bigwig, and turns himself in, still insisting he didn't do it. Unfortunately for him, while he was talking to someone on the phone, a small group of police officers overhear him on the phone saying, "I'm in a lot of trouble. That guy I hit died. He's doing all kinds of hard time now." Grade school was not easy for me. I was a little different at a small Catholic school, maybe about 20 kids. I had one friend named Scott who got along with everyone, but the rest of guys either didn't care for me or would be generally negative towards me in our interactions inside and outside of class. Nothing physical, but from my memory it was always about me being worse than they were at things. Sports, school etc. or stupid in the things I said, asking me questions and mocking my answers. One named Josh, who seemed to hate most everything about me, lived in my neighborhood and I would generally avoid him. I ended up switching to one of the public middle schools and found a much more welcoming peer group. Time went on and one Monday in high school I came in the morning and noticed a lot of the girls were crying. This was a decently small town, so the student bodies of the public and Catholic schools knew each other well for the most part. Josh was pretty well liked by most other people and had a circle of friends at my school. I'm unnerved by there being more than a few girls in the hallway crying, but don't think much of it. My first period class was bio and I sat next to a girl named Amber who I had enjoyed a friendly rapport with for most of the semester, as bio wasn't really her strong suit. I came in, sat down and noticed that her makeup was smeared and finally had to ask what had happened. She and Josh were very close and she told me that he had been in a car accident on Sunday and had died. I would later learn that he was driving to visit friends that lived outside of town and had carelessly driven through a train intersection that doesn't have gate arms. Apparently he didn't bother to stop and look for an oncoming train and had his stereo up loud enough that he didn't hear it either. The train hit his car and he was thrown from the vehicle, presumably dying on impact or shortly thereafter. I would also later learn that this train had a camera installed on the front of it and they provided his family with the footage of the collision for legal reasons. I still can't imagine the horror his mother had to go through watching that video. I went to his wake and remember feeling pretty numb. I had hated this guy so much for a significant portion of my life, but I had a surge of feeling that I didn't really believe that he deserved to die at 16. The wake was a pretty surreal experience for me. I was surrounded by those who had either bullied me or were indifferent about my existence for several formative years for me. I was watching them in pain for losing a friend and peer. I couldn't feel spite or hate for them anymore. They were human beings who were grieving the death of another. I just look back and see that even as children they were people. Some people are terrible. Some people can show goodness. How nice of you. I would have to resist every urge to laugh at his death to their faces. I probably would cave to my temptation. Riding the bus in middle school was heck. Two boys in particular were the worst. They were the overgrown type of 13-year-olds who looked like 30-somethings, and they absolutely terrified me. I was the go-to girl to make fun of in general at that school, but the bus rides were terrifying. I found out the camera at the front of the bus never actually records when I went to the principal for help and was told they couldn't do anything about it. These boys pulled out their dongs and tried to get me to look at them, sang songs about how disgusting I was, slammed me into the back window of the bus, literally tossed me around until I had bruises on my arms and legs, etc. And all the bus driver did was tell them to be quiet. Frick public school. I didn't tell my mom what was happening until 8th grade graduation because I figured if the principal couldn't help me, she couldn't either. It was completely fricked. One of those guys ended up with a felony, if I'm remembering correctly, for stealing a Rolls-Royce Phantom and trying to sell it the same day. Apparently the owner saw the car in a parking lot about 2 blocks from his house. You're a genius, have a great life. At my 10-year reunion, a woman apologized for pulling a prank on me. In 11th grade, someone had handed me a paintball but told me it was a gumball. Having never seen a paintball before, I popped it in my mouth without hesitation and proceeded to swallow latex paint and then vomit up my entire lunch. She told me she felt terrible, but I never knew it had been her idea to do it. I laugh about it now, and forgave her immediately. TLDR. 11-year-old prank apologized for and forgiven. Mine had a heart attack at 24. Turns out steroids, and brawling was a bad combo. My cousin married a great guy a few years back who grew up in the town over from me. One day he asked me if I knew a certain name, because the guy had gone to my high school. Sure enough, it was the guy who tormented me in elementary school, and was too jacked for me to fight in high school, whose name I hoped never to hear again. Apparently the two of them worked in the same office. It was soon after my cousin's marriage and I didn't want to act like I was whining to someone who was now family. So I said, yeah, we went to elementary school together. I can't really speak to anything about him since. Fast forward about a year, and I'm hanging out with the new cousin-in-law again. He says, oh by the way, you hated, didn't you? He had figured it out by my response. I try to make a point of praising people who aren't around, and I'm sort of upbeat in general, and, since he already knew, I admitted it and told him some horror stories. Oh, you're gonna love this then, he says. Turns out they didn't just work in the same office. My cousin-in-law was the dude's boss. He had only hired him as a favor to someone else, thinking maybe he was just in a bad situation elsewhere. But nope, he was a terrible employee and was right on the cusp of being fired. So when my cousin-in-law asked me about him and I clearly had nothing good to say, that decided it. I'd like to say that a part of me regrets even the small part I played in revenge on this guy, but really I don't regret it at all, and I just love the fact that it played out exactly as the 9-year-old me would have liked. It gets better. TLDR. My old bully got fired, at least in part because he bullied me. Mostly he built his own cage, though. Had he been a decent guy, you'd have never heard about it. Had he gotten his butt handed to him a couple of times, he might have done that. Kick bullies' asses. It's a public service, and good for them later in life. We had no bullies per se. We had a famous killer and an even more famous criminal in my high school, but they were cool to me. But the people who were jerks and buttholes pretty much turned out to have crappy lives. It's only idiots who think that liars and cheats get ahead. In reality, people see through their crap and don't want anything to do with them. Maybe not the karma you're looking for, but here it goes. I got in a fist fight with a friend over them ragging on me 24/7 for a couple years. The subsequent fallout with the group just led to a bunch of problems with me trying to find new friends when I was 13-15. Man, it really sucked. One day when I was 18 and on my way home from orchestra, I pulled into a McDonald's for a burger. Turns out he was working the register and looked at me with the most sincere smile and said, "Hey Mark, I haven't seen you in forever. How are things? We should catch up sometime. Sorry about the past." I was dumbfounded, said something like, "Yeah, thanks man. Sure thing." Maybe that wasn't so much about karma, but it was nice to see the guy really changed. Some people get more mature and realize they were buttholes. Others continue to be dongs and blame the world for their problems. In high school, the quarterback of our football team was an all-star named Hunter Wall. He was a piece of crap who liked to frick with underclassmen and people that were smaller than him. He got a scholarship to play for OU, which he quickly lost after being arrested for breaking into someone's home and stealing marijuana, easily found on Google. Also, at one point, an opposing football team spray painted Hunter Wall as a dong in huge letters on the side of an abandoned but very visible gas station in the middle of town. Rarely have I laughed harder at a local news story. Glad to hear he really was a pose. Makes me feel better that we didn't lose a true talent. I got bullied to crap throughout all of my school years. I was always the bigger girl. I never had pretty hair, never had pretty clothes, and I never acted like a girl. I'd rather have been out playing footy with the boys and playing computer games. Well, secondary school was supposed to be the big break for me. Yeah, like frick was it. The first 3 years of high school were living heck because of a guy who started all the crap who was 4 years ahead of me in school. This is where my anxiety stemmed from. I got picked on and constantly abused by kids 3-4 years older than me. One stupid bee decided to start a fight with me on the bus for no reason, claiming I was talking to her cousin when he blatantly admitted he doesn't even know her. I stood there, took the pushing about, then lost it and walk off at the first stop. Fast forward 3 years after I left school. I'm chatting to an old school friend I bumped into at a supermarket and had a catch up. We weren't great friends and she was a bit of a bee in school, but she explained about her mental health and what she went through, and I understood completely where she was coming from. Well, stupid bee who started on me 4 years before did the whole OMG, hey I haven't seen you in years, how are you doing, OMG you ride a motorbike, that is so cool, can I sit on it? My response, frick off. She seemed confused and started babbling on and I just replied with frick off. I never forgot what you did to me. I wish I'd kicked the crap out of you then and I still would now, so sit down and shut the frick up. I was talking and you interrupted. She obeyed and it felt good. I don't care if I get downvotes or hated for it, but she was a C and she made my life heck then, and I am still dealing with what happened to me. I didn't really have high school bullies, as the first 2 years of high school I was a recluse. But the people that did give me crap, I can take comfort after running into them at parties that I'm more successful, on my way to a good career, doing something with my life, way more physically stronger than them. I know it sounds vain, but in high school this was always flaunted in front me. Little did I know I was extremely late bloomer, and everyone likes me for being a nice person, as opposed to high school where you were often persecuted for it. Basically everything they tried to obtain in high school I've obtained in reality. My middle school bully went to Princeton and is still a complete butthole. Oh, karma, you said? That crap doesn't exist. All through middle school and high school, there was this cheerleader named Nicole who tormented me every day. Horrible, mean bee. Fast forward 3 years after graduation, I'm working at a prestigious daycare center for high-income families. A very well-known center in my area, making the big bucks. On my lunch break one day, I was craving something greasy and terrible for me, so I rolled through the drive-thru at Wendy's, still wearing my work uniform with the unmistakable logo on the shirt, when lo and behold, Nicole hands me my food. She saw me, she knew who I was, she also saw the shirt, and the karma is a fiery C just like you smirk on my face. She was visibly embarrassed. Fast food has never been so delicious. Moral of the story, now I'm freaking starving and I want a cheeseburger. Till there are prestigious daycares. One of the biggest buttholes and idiots I ever knew in high school is now a full-time Bible thumper walking door to door trying to preach. Does that count? Yes. My junior year of high school, a girl spread rumors that I fricked a guy on a trampoline at a party. This lie almost ruined my relationship with my boyfriend. After this, she had the nerve to ask me why I didn't get her a birthday present. Once I got past the absurdity of it, I was pretty angry. Cut to present day. I'm a senior a month away from graduation. I'm headed to college in Oregon. She's got herpes, a kid and no diploma. Checkmate. B. Just noticed that the cool kid of my graduating class said this on Facebook. Background check and drug test came back clean, so I start orientation on Friday for Walmart. I am truly blessed. Sick. By the way, got 10 likes. This girl who humiliated me for asking her out ended up getting pregnant with twins and couldn't continue high school. Well dodged, sir. I think the two I'm thinking of were kind of bully-ish for a lot of people, but now one is a dermatologist and the other is a cardiologist. Proof that while some bullying is skin deep, other types can go straight to the heart. A girl that punched me in the face in high school is now pregnant by a guy that I dated first. How does my pee taste? B. I know this one will probably be buried, but I had the exact opposite of bully karma. I got to watch my bully ride the bench of the Indianapolis Colts as they won the Super Bowl. He has a ring. I will never ever go to a high school reunion ever again. Most of the girls that teased me in high school are now single mothers who still live at home, or they recently graduated college and are working at places like Walmart. I, on the other hand, will be married for 3 years on the 18th, have 2 beautiful daughters and own my own home. Feels good, man. My high school bully is battling breast cancer right now. I don't get any satisfaction from this. That's terrible. Nobody deserves that, comma. Only one guy bullied me for a bit. He ended up marrying into money and now drives a fricking Lamborghini while I serve up fricking cough at Starbucks. Epic win : Ex-bullies of Reddit, what was your turning point? We picked on this boy in grades 4 to 5, who was a little different. We would say he smelt and such. Even made a game called Stinky Boy where we all ran away from him. The teacher made me sit with him for the year and I mocked him constantly. One day he invited me to his birthday. I was confused but still went. Turns out he thought I was his best friend and gave me one of 5 special sleepover invitations. He invited all of my friend group at the time, all of which made fun of him. I was the only kid out of our class of 30 he had invited to show up to this poor kid's birthday. He was so happy to see me. We played games all night and I had so much fun with him. Turns out the reason we thought he was smelly was because he had to wear the same pair of old cloths because his single father couldn't afford much else. Did I mention that his dad said to me that he had heard so much about me and how his son was so happy to have a friend like me? He even called my parents to tell them how happy he was that his son had finally found a friend. I hung out with him every snack time after that. Now in my final year of school I be sure to ask him what's up when I see him in the school, as we grew apart and he finally found friends after I introduced him to some people. Looking back, it makes me sad that kids can be so cruel. That poor kid. How sweet. I attended elementary, middle and a year of high school in an economically depressed working class town, where the mills had closed down and families were hanging on by threads, if at all. It was a nightmare, like living in a prison. Bullying was rampant through the entire culture. Even the teachers would bully kids in unspeakable ways. So yeah, to my shame, I also bullied kids, just as I was being bullied by others. When I moved away to a different city, where bullying was not part of the culture, I suddenly found that I had no desire to be mean to other kids. I no longer felt seeing people humiliated or afraid was funny or gratifying in any way, and not having to feel that way myself was absolutely liberating. In fact, I suddenly found it kind of repulsive on the rare occasion where I witnessed someone being bullied. I once saw a friend of mine bullying some nerdy kid, and actually found myself telling him to cut it out and leave him be, something I would never have done in my previous schools. I myself never bullied anyone again after I left that crap town. Years ago there was an experiment where a rat would be given an electrical shock periodically at random intervals. He would become terribly stressed out and miserable, and start behaving neurotically. Then, a new rat would be introduced to the cage, and the rat that had been shocked would suddenly attack the new rat with a bizarre ferocity. Now the new rat would be stressed out, miserable and neurotic, but the shocked rat would calm down and be just fine, as if all the pain and fear that had been imposed on him had simply been transferred to the new rat. I think once you understand this about rats, you come to understand a lot about people. I'm a freaking rat. In middle school, me and another girl hit off really well because we both shared a love for video games and anime, and we always stuck up for each other because we did get teased a little for our hobbies. Fast forward to high school, I started hanging out with a group of cool girls, and they always made fun of my friend. Because I was with them, I thought it was okay to do it too. So I also teased her and left her out in a lot of my activities. This continued on for 2 years, and in the middle of our junior year she sent me a text message that made me reconsider probably every single life decision I've made. Hey Burp Brain, I've known you for almost 5 years and have always considered you as my best friend, but I know people move on and drift. That being said, if you don't want to hang out with me anymore, I wish you told me to my face instead of visibly moving away from me and mocking me. I wish you all the best. I sat on that for weeks and weeks, and finally during senior year, I left that group of girls, who I later found were not so cool, and decided to apologize to my friend. I said I was an idiot and I was so concerned with high school popularity I threw away probably my most important friendships. It's been another 5 years since then, and she and I are still really close. It's one point in our lives we don't talk about because I'm still really ashamed about it, but I'm glad she's forgiven me and has become one of my most supportive friends today. This is beautiful. I've often reflected on this, especially recently going to therapy, which involves a lot of childhood stuff. Simple version is that bullying was endemic in my life all the way through. My brother bullied me. Our dad was horrible to him in particular. The neighbors were murderous shitbags who used to kill our pets, damage our property and make our lives heck at every opportunity. School was top-down bullying in which anyone weaker was fair game to be tormented. I found solace outdoors as much as possible on my own or working with adults at weekends and holidays. I used to enjoy fighting. I removed pain, remorse, caring, empathy or desire from my feelings. My joy was making people angry enough to attack me then thump them a lot, as I really did not give a frick about anything or anyone. Except one friend called Clay. She got through my armor and I really lived for the tiny moments I shared with her on the bus ride home. One day as I had finished fighting some poor kids on my way to sit beside her, I sat down to her asking me why I did that. I left school at 15 with this ringing in my head. Left home as soon as I legally could at 16. Past a group of kids my own age who tried to intimidate me as I passed by on a route I knew I was going to be using regularly. Decided I was done with the whole bull's cycle of abusive behavior, so walked right up to the whole group of them and offered to fight them all. I laughed at them when they backed down, went on my way. Took me a good few years to stop fighting at the drop of a hat, but a few rushes with the law brought that into focus. Not to mention a few beatings. Low, zero, self-esteem, lack of role models and a misguided love of physical violence made me a total of from 11-15, but a kind word from someone I realized was my only true friend at the time gave me the impetus to begin to grow. Now I work with kids and try to drop in little nudges myself. I use positive reinforcement, praise and crap ton of patience, as well as being a good person to my colleagues for the pupils to see. So to Clee, wherever you are, I say a huge thank you. Clee, you the real MVP. I was a victim, not the bully, but I got to witness this moment. My elementary school didn't have a gym, so we'd walk a mile to the lake in the neighborhood to run laps, as it was almost a mile in circumference. Now, I had pretty bad asthma, which was often induced by exercise, and the school had a rule that all medication had to stay with a nurse on campus. My bully, let's call her Kat, started off with little things, like stabbing scissors through my pigtails into her desk so that when I tried to stand up, I would tear my hair out, or making fun of my being a Jew. It eventually advanced to the point where she would make openly anti-Semitic comments and write them up on the board. She would lock me in the bathroom by pushing a chair against the outside knob so I'd be stuck there until someone got me out. And at one point, she kicked my arm so hard that she caused severe damage to the muscle fibers, and I was in a sling for several months. One day, we had pay, and the teacher decided we would go run laps. So we went to the lake, and the teacher told us to run around the lake twice, and then we could be done for the day. Kat was the second slowest runner in class. I was the slowest. I finished one lap, and I felt ill. So I get halfway around the lake for my second lap. When my throat closes shut, I fell to my knees, gasping for air, trying to scream, but nothing comes out. I see Kat retreating, and I'm barely able to call out her name in a hoarse whisper. Somehow, she heard me, she saw me, and next thing I knew, she was carrying me, fireman style. A few minutes later, I heard the teacher screaming at her to stop, that she would fail, but Kat kept running. She ran 1.5 miles with me on her shoulder, and brought me to the school nurse. When the nurse refused to administer the inhaler because she wasn't sure, Kat grabbed it and helped me use it. My heart started beating really fast, as they had grabbed the wrong inhaler, but I could breathe. Kat saw that something was wrong and gave me a phone to type in my phone number, and she spoke to my parents, telling them to come quick. They took me home, and I rested. Kat didn't ever come back to school, but she told me later that when she saw me there, something took over, and she had to help me. In that instant of seeing me helpless and alone, she was the only one who could save me, and she did. She apologized for everything, and thanked me for changing her life for the better. If she hadn't grabbed me and hauled butt, no one would have gotten to me in time. She saved my life, and that act changed her forever. Last I heard, she was training to be a firefighter. There's something very wrong and very beautiful when both the pay teacher and the nurse were so inept, at the same time that your enemy saved your life. Thanks for sharing. I bullied this one boy and one girl when I was a kid. Don't know why really, I simply did. The boy was younger than me and I made him go home every time I saw him at the playground. If he wouldn't, I'd slap him around a bit until he did. The girl was my age and much bigger than me, but I was still the bully. I stopped bullying the boy on his first day of school, my first day of 3rd grade. He saw me in the schoolyard and immediately started crying and ran inside. That's when I realized he was actually afraid of me and the bullying stopped being funny. The girl got me off bullying for good. We were at a 7-day vacation out of town, and I tortured that poor girl for days. Called her names, pulled boards from under her mattress so she would fall, rubbed toothpaste on her hands while she was sleeping, all kinds of nasty crap. On the 5th day she finally had enough, and just walked away. A 10-year-old kid walked away on her own into the woods. No one could find her the whole day. I actually got really scared that something would happen to her because of me. She finally appeared in the evening, alive and well. She was hiding nearby and watched us look for her the whole day. Only came out when she got hungry. I never bullied anyone mentally or physically ever again. I was one mean kid. I have a feeling this will hit close to home for some people. In grade school I was kind of a bully. I say kind of, because it was mostly just kid stuff and I wasn't vindictive about it like some of the kids in school were, but nonetheless I was not a stellar person. In about 6th or 7th grade, my mom got cancer. For a few years, it felt like nothing could ever go right for me, and it felt like it was never my fault. In high school, once most of these things had passed, and I was back to my normal semi-bullying ways, an older friend of mine, who I had confided in during the rough years, put it this way: you know that feeling when everything seems like it's going against you and you had no hand in causing it? That's what kids that get bullied constantly feel like. Why are they refuse the right to enjoy their interests and do what they want? I was flabbergasted. For weeks I went around the high school apologizing to kids I had bullied because I felt like such a piece of crap. As someone who was bullied so much I had to eat lunch in the stalls and the bathroom for over a year, this thread has peed me off. There's a lot of I was and but because I was stupid then, but I eventually decided it was wrong, so everything's probably okay now. No, everything's not okay now. Some of us still carry the scars into adulthood because you were too stupid to realize the consequences of your actions. What are you doing now? Are you actively trying to dissuade bullying from happening when you have the chance? I sure hope so. There's also a lot of I became a bully to my bully and that bothers me. Because, see, no one had any freaking excuse to bully me. I did nothing. I sat in class and read. In gym class I was called a slimy disgusting little worm by girls who had never spoken to me before. I was put in a small room throughout gym, alone, so they wouldn't bully me. They were mean but the teachers isolated me. I loved rabbits and often read books about them, wore t-shirts with them, had a bag with a bunny on it, would draw them in class. This led to 2B concocting a story about finding a mother rabbit, slitting her belly and stringing her up in front of her babies. They laughed when I broke down. I was also passing by when a group of girls were sharing the story of Bloody Mary by a bathroom and challenging each other to go in with the lights off and say her name. I was just passing by. I got dragged in and they put their full weight on the door. They wouldn't let me out even after I panicked and screamed. I didn't have any friends to defend me. Some teachers did defend me. I didn't even think the word friend was real for years. Up until my late 20s I thought it was a lie. I am still not able to trust people, for the most part, because even though I am kind, people will eventually either be mean to me or get close to me and decide it's okay to emotionally abuse me, that I'm not worth being kind to. My good behavior, which should logically get good behavior in return, doesn't. That's fricked up. People who hurt people unprovoked are fricked up. My abilities, my compassion, none of it matters. You make people feel like they don't matter. You are weak if you bully. Do you understand that? Anyone can hurt anyone. Anyone can break something or hit something. It takes no skill. Building people up, holding them when they cry, making time for them, nurturing them. That is strength. Not everyone can do that. My tormentors realized exactly how much it was bothering me. Every single one of them. That is why they did it. So I suspect a lot of you aren't being completely honest when you say you didn't understand the consequences, or only bullied your bully, and that is disgusting. I suspect I'm going to be downvoted. It happens sometimes when I talk about how much I am hurting. Let me just point out that downvotes don't help. They don't soothe anyone. They don't resolve anything. I started to realize that the isolation I felt was caused by my own actions, and surprisingly I noticed that people were much friendlier and kinder when I started treating them with dignity and respect. Predominantly male bullies. As a girl who was mercilessly bullied in high school, makes me sad that most never realize or own up to their behavior. Girl bullying is awful. To be fair, Reddit has a lot more males than females. Something like 80% of Redditors are male. That's why a lot of post responses in any given sub seem to be coming from a man. Not generally a bully, just with this one kid. Like a lot of the others posting, I didn't even realize how much it was bothering him. For me, it was just a little bit of joking around. One day we were all playing a game of tag or something like that, and he deliberately set up an ambush for me. I was bigger and faster than him so he never had a chance. I instinctively took one shot at him, hit him in the stomach, but the fact that he went so far out of his way to set up the whole encounter kind of made me realize that I was the problem here, and the fight didn't go beyond that. We didn't become best friends or anything afterwards, but I left him alone after and we seemed to be okay. As a girl, I liked playing rough with the boys in elementary school, and by playing rough, I mean kicking, hitting and punching them whenever I got the chance. This led to girls being afraid of me, and more boys keeping me company and attracting more male friends with the phrase if you can't stand a hit from her, then you aren't a real man. This one time, as we were playing, I threw a bottle full of water, not caring where it landed as long as it hit a boy. It hit the smallest, kindest and quietest guy in our class. He cried. I came and told him the usual. Did it hurt that much? Here, you can hit me back. While I offered him the bottle, he shook his head and cleaned his face. It's alright. I forgive you. It hit me so freaking hard. I kept thinking about it all day and cried when I got into my room after school. It felt gross to be me. Why did I do that? What was wrong with me? So I never hit anyone again, unless the other party agreed we would do so. I kept wrestling and doing martial arts with everyone. though I set clear limits and a safe word if it was too much. Did karma came back at me? Nah, but everything got way better since. One of the guys whom I punched the most asked me out later on, while kids from smaller grades came looking for me to deal with their bullies. I had quite the fame, so it just took a casual chat with their bullies to make them stop. As a bonus, my younger brother was never messed with because of it, which I'm very grateful for because he's the exact opposite of me at his age. Fragile, sensible and really noble. After moving on from elementary school, I never saw the quiet boy again, but I see so much of him in the way my lil bro acts, as a reminder of my wrongs and who I must aspire to be. I was the bullied guy in this story. We had our 20-year reunion a while ago, and I made an offhanded comment to a classmate when I saw him for the first time at the party. "Good to see you, Mark. You were always my favorite bully. TLDR. He ended up sobbing on my shoulder with honest to God remorse within 30 minutes. I bullied my male classmates throughout elementary school because I wanted people to think I was strong. I'm female and grew up with brothers, so everything came down to me being better than the boys. One day in 5th grade, my group of girlfriends, also bullies, turned on me and verbally and physically hurt me. I realized what it was like to be on the other side and started sticking up for the kids who were bullied instead. Yeah, my bullies won't be on here. I see them on social media. They also include my older brother, and none of them changed. I guess not everyone matures. Also, this wasn't America. It was North Africa, and to survive as a guy was to beat up others or get beaten up yourself. Not a bully but someone who was bullied. I beat the ever-loving crap out of my bully. He used to have this habit of jumping on my back and humping me for some reason. He was a senior in high school and I was a freshman. One day I dodged and he went face first into a desk. When he was on the floor I began to stomp on his face. I was saying something too but I forgot what. The bullying ended after that. You gave him the ole Rafi. Realizing that bullying people doesn't make others like you, I learned relevantly fast. A semester of high school, and I apologized to the person who I bullied. After that we became best friends and kinda laugh about it. Bullying to make Blair like you is interesting. I've never heard that. There was a girl in my science class who was kinda a social outcast but super clever. I bullied her because 1. I was jealous at how easy she found school. 2. My friend was bullying too. When I left secondary school I grew up a lot and realized I was really nasty to her for no reason. Ended up contacting her and apologizing. She's now training to be a doctor, and I genuinely wish the best for her. Not me, but this guy who came in for tech support at my uni's library went on about how he bullied the bullies. Stopped when he realized that those guys were like that because of household issues. There was this kid much smaller than me that would constantly watch FNAF and Undertale videos. I hated the games and still hate them, but one day he drew one of the characters and I couldn't help but love the drawing. It was that good. I don't like the games, but I don't pick on anyone for liking something that I don't anymore. I was a terrible bully for most of my childhood. I never beat anyone up, but I engaged in a lot of psychological torture manipulation. I was the only black kid in my school, so to avoid being teased and singled out and harassed, I played the gang leader and teased others. I was also a lot smarter than other kids my age, so teachers loved me and I used that to my advantage a lot. I would get kids in trouble, spread rumors, break up friendships, and body shame. The worst thing I ever did. I cringe thinking about it to this day. I lied and said a little boy called me the N-word. His parents and my parents were called into a meeting with the principal and he was forced to apologize to me. I kept my cool and he lost it, and his parents eventually forced him, through tears, to apologize to me. I'm sure they punished him a lot more at home. I'm not saying this to brag, it actually haunts me still, and if that kid became a lifelong racist I couldn't blame him. It's easily the worst thing I've ever done, and I never stop thinking about it. I've taken the Jussie Smollett hoax pretty personally as well. Which brings me to the turning point. I wish it were a moment of empathy, or an intellectual revelation that brought me around to loving and ethical relations with my fellow humans. But really it was biology. I figured out I was gay in the 9th grade, and understood pretty quickly that I could not get away with teasing. manipulating, and hurting people without becoming a major target myself. So I made friends. I learned to be trustworthy and vulnerable. I developed values that prioritized kindness over power. And despite the tremendous guilt I still feel from my days as a bully, I can say easily that I'm a lot happier now. Capital I. If you know how to contact the kid that you lied about, you owe it to his family and yourself to come clean and apologize. I hate to use this phrase, but I guess I was one of the popular kids in high school, meaning I just knew a lot of people from sports and other clubs that branched out across multiple grades. From grades 9-12 I used this popularity to make some pretty relentless jokes against people I didn't like or did genuinely like. I would say outrageously offside things about people, and I unfortunately have the ability to determine what an individual's biggest insecurity is, and I'd go for that. I never physically hurt anyone, but I know I hurt a lot of feelings by saying jokes that were almost never warranted. I guess my turning point was maturing. Once I left the bubble that is high school, I realized how awful I had been to my peers without any repercussions for myself. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is 10 or 20 years in the future when these people are gonna flip through their yearbook and see my photo and tell their spouse or kid how big of a douche I was, and you know what? They'd be absolutely right to do that. I am ashamed of who I was and have actively been trying to become a friendlier and kinder member of society. I still deal with a lot of the same insecurities I struggled with years ago, but I've realized now that my problems aren't a reason to treat others like crap. If I could do it all again, I'd do it a lot differently. I never want to be that person again. About sophomore year I realized how fricked the culture was in my school. We had a group of accepted kids. Generally, the accepted were either rich, athletic, or good looking. No in between. I was in the accepted group, and bullying anybody less than us was the norm. We had a kid in football who was so poor, he would wear the same blue jeans to practice every day. We called him Blue Jeans. He was also mentally handicapped. The older guys would frick with him constantly. A major example of this were two guys, jacked, butt naked, twerking on him in stormtrooper masks, bare man butt all in his face. Another was a friend of mine choke slamming him in practice, and Blue Jeans running crying to the locker room. I soon distanced myself from the crowd and got shunned by men. I began calling people out on their bulls. If anyone on here is being bullied, especially in high school, just remember this isn't the rest of your life. The people that bully you are nobodies and probably internally hate themselves. Just focus on you and how you want your future to be. Basically what I'm saying is, your bullies can suck your butt. Frick high school in rural Oklahoma, man. I was the girl who said what everyone was thinking, but actually what I was saying was mean and cruel and not helpful. As an adult, there's so much mean stuff I said or did that surfaces when I'm trying to go to sleep. Hurt people. I came from a family situation where I was hurt, so I made sure to hurt everyone else. It took me losing a lot of friends, my one true love, and growing into an adult with frequent altercations before I was able to recognize my attitude for what it was: rotten. There wasn't one single moment but a series of small opportunities to present myself differently and be positive. I guess at a certain point I wanted to feel love instead of always feeling hurt by self-inflicted wounds. I wanted to be perceived differently, because you know, once you establish yourself as a mean girl in high school, the people around you kind of enforce that. For me that carried on into adulthood, and I got to a point where I had to make a decision between two paths, and one was difficult and the other was significantly more loving and positive, but required me to learn to think positive thoughts. I still have to reframe my perceptions manually, but the change is sticking. Sometimes I'm shocked that people like me, because for so long I was a friend that no one really liked but was still invited to outings, like the token bully. But then I remember it's because I'm not trying to be a dong to everyone anymore. An ex told me right before dumping me that I was a huge butthole, not just to her but to people in general. I really reevaluated how I was treating others after that. Realized I had a lot of people to apologize to, but I could at least redeem myself. Maybe you should thank your ex for giving you the clarity to change your ways. She could have easily left you in the dark about your negative behaviors, but instead wanted you to understand this about yourself. It sounded like this person actually cared about you. Hamlet. Our English teacher explained what the queen meant when she said, "Methinks the lady doth protest too much." Anyways, I was notorious for picking on gay kids, which meant everyone must think I am a closeted gay overcompensating. Long story short, I gave up bullying because it was too gay. Jesus. I wish so bad every day that I could tell everyone that I picked on that. I'm so sorry for being so crappy. I was bullied myself and it made me mean. I did it. I think she noticed I had changed via social media, so when we bumped into each other, we sat and talked. I honestly thought I tormented her and felt guilty for years. She said she knew I was a decent person just dealing with raging teenager hormones, and she was proud I turned into a decent person. I wanted to cry with relief. I'm not sure I was much of a bully, but I was kind of in butthole when I was a kid. Had no problem picking on other kids. In my circle of friends when I was in 5th grade, there was one who I picked on and teased a lot. Once I got him so mad he called me out for a fight after school. So we fought in the breezeway by the school. It was mostly lame kid stuff, grappling and crap talk. At one point he had me in a sort of headlock and I reached my arm over and punched him in the face. Then twisted out of the hold, pinned him on the ground. He didn't submit until one of the other kids found some dog crap and stuck it under his face. Anyway, that whole thing was way beyond what I ever wanted. The feeling of my fist on his face. I didn't ever want to do that again to anyone, and I respected him a lot for not putting up with my crap, and for how long he held out. I did a lot of thinking and changed how I treated people, and I never got into a physical fight with anyone after that. In his case, I think he took it different. Started lifting weights and getting strong. We made up and stayed in the same circle of friends. And by 8th grade he was pretty bulked up and could have kicked my butt anytime if he wanted. But we got along. One of my best friends. How the frick do you type that first paragraph and still not think you were that much of a bully? What is the worst case of kids bullying a teacher in school have you ever witnessed? I was in 9th grade. We had a teacher that couldn't start the beginning of the year because she unexpectedly lost her baby. She either had a stillbirth or lost the baby during birth. She started school about 2 weeks after classes started. She explained to us that she was still struggling, but was ready to get to work. I had these few boys in my class that relentlessly told dead baby jokes, sometimes to the point where she would have to leave the room. I'm 24 now and we lost a baby in my family in a similar way. When I think about that poor teacher now, my heart just shatters. Kids can be so awful. I had a chorus teacher who had a miscarriage and tons of kids made her card saying how great she was. A few years later this douchebag kid was in her class. She went from elementary to middle, and he always tormented her. One time he told her he was glad her baby died because she'd be a terrible mother. Disgusting waste of space. There's this lovely old Asian man who teaches math at my school. He is one of the loveliest people I have ever met. He makes a huge effort to remember your name, who you're related to, and always says hi, how are you every time he sees you in his dorky cute foreign voice. He's too calm and nice, so the kids in my year constantly yell at him and disobey him. Even when he's sick they'll just torment him by walking around the room, taking confiscated items, etc. I feel so bad for him. Sounds like my maths teacher in HS. He didn't speak English very clearly, but he was a very skilled mathematician. Kids would make fun of his accent and even trip him as he walked between rows of tables. Thankfully, he got to move up to the senior HS and was treated a lot better since the kids he was teaching wanted to learn. One of my social studies teachers had this classroom with a big storage closet, and so he went back there one day to grab a documentary, and when he was in there some kid pulled the door shut and locked it. The class then spent the entire period watching Superbad on the little car TV that had been wheeled in the movie. I had the class the period afterwards when they finally let him out, and he had this just sad defeated vibe for the next few days. That's so messed up. First year female teacher was getting onto a troublemaker girl who always mouthed off. She started screaming and cursing at the teacher, calling her horrible things. The teacher starts, professionally, yelling at her to leave the classroom, and the girl says, "I'm gonna have my friends rape your daughter and kill her." The teacher walked out of the room. Everyone was telling the girl how fricked up that was. A few male teachers came into the room and took the girl out of the classroom. We had another teacher sit with us the rest of the class period. A friend of mine said he saw my teacher crying in the hallway from another classroom after she left. She should have called the police for a threat like that. My Apache teacher in high school was an excitable but average height man who was very passionate about teaching US history. Most students liked him quite a bit, but every once in a while there would be a student in my school who would try to physically fight a teacher. One kid tries it in the hall, swings at Mr. Apache. Less than a second later, the kid is sucking wind on the floor and tearing up. Teacher looks him square in the eyes and says, "I was a goddamn Marine in Vietnam. I've killed better men than you'll ever be. You're tardy. Lunch detention's in my room today," and walked away. My little brother graduated 4 years after I did and said that nobody had ever fricked with the goddamn Marine since then. I used to teach 4th grade. The day we got back from winter break my first year, one of my favorite students gave me a hug and said, "Mr. Yams with extra syrup, you look fat and sleepy. Thanks Yadira." Maybe it was all the yams with extra syrup. In 8th grade, my US history teacher had a student teacher for the last part of the year. He wasn't the most attractive guy, and some of the popular guys started calling him a flack because they said he looked like a duck. They'd quack at him when he'd ask the class to do something and they'd whisper a flack all during class. Poor guy. He didn't really stand up for himself, like he's self-conscious about his looks and was trying to ignore it. Yeah, the best way to seem confident is to go, "I don't look like a duck, guys, stop it, stoop." There was a history teacher in my middle school who was gay, and when his students found out, they hit him hard with it. He eventually broke down and cried in front of the class about it and talking about how much he loves his students and couldn't understand why they would treat him like that. And middle school kids are like sharks. You spill a little bit of blood in the water and they're going to have a feast. Any signs of weakness and those kids will take full advantage of it. You gotta put those little shoots on lockdown ASAP as a middle school teacher. For some reason their hormones reinforce some sort of mentality that they're top dogs and the teachers are glorified babysitters. You gotta stomp that crap out fast. In my junior year of high school, our English teacher got called out of class. Someone turned off the lights. I thought no biggie, crap happens. When she came back in the room, someone threw and hit her with a hardback English school book. Hit her in the head. She wasn't young either, at least 60. Crap, what happened after? I remember in a 7th grade, there was this teacher right down the hall from the classroom which I had 3 of my classes in. I would constantly hear yelling, screaming, things being thrown, etc. She had a reputation for being one of the worst teachers in the school. One day she just broke down and cried in front of her class. Then, her class lost it and literally ran out of her room and went somewhere in the 8th grade hall. Some of them were caught and suspended. Anyway, one of my classmates decided to look into her window, and she saw just an empty classroom during 6th period with a sobbing teacher in it. It got so serious among us, even our teacher at the time went in to comfort her. That year, her class had the worst scores on any subject on the CRCT or whatever it was called. Worse, since she always yelled at her students, she had worked up a bad reputation with the other teachers. I think she was fired after only 1 year of teaching. We had a substitute English teacher while our regular teacher was out on maternity. The substitute teacher was very young, probably only about 21. Kids used to make her life heck, and just didn't respect her. No one listened to a thing she said. Everyone interrupted her when she was talking. People threw stuff at her when her back was turned. No one did any homework she gave them, including me. But I never done any homework, so she cried one day in class and everyone just left to go to the next class. It was a huge thing at the time, and everyone was like, "We made her cry, ha ha ha." I felt really bad even though I wasn't involved, and I bought her some chocolate with my lunch money and brought it back to English class. Even my sister called me a dork for that colon. I can almost guarantee you that she still remembers that kindness. Good on you. Back when I was in 8th grade, I was riding the school bus in the morning and one of the bitchiest girls in 7th grade found a dead lizard in the bus and took it to their teacher. The teacher was a very nice old woman who taught for around 40 years and loved her students. Anyway, as soon we got off the bus and into the school, the B-girl immediately put the dead lizard on the teacher's desk and their teacher was screaming and hyperventilating. As soon as that happened, our teacher, who was a young woman in her 20s, immediately went to the 7th grade room and gave them a stern talking about why it was wrong and how they fricked up. We found out later that the 7th graders wanted their teacher to get a heart attack and die on the spot, and they were laughing about too. They were so fricked up. 7th graders wanted their teacher to get a heart attack and die on the spot. What the actual frick? In sophomore year at high school, I had this world history teacher who was this really cool, really smart and kind of younger guy. He was a fantastic teacher, but he was kind of timid around the students when they would act up more, especially the girls, who would tease him more. One girl in particular seemed to get a kick out of making him uncomfortable, usually by this sort of weird flirting when he'd tell her to stop talking in class. It really made me upset sometimes, because it was obvious he hated it, but was just hesitant about giving her any sort of ammo. The tables turned one day, though. See, this girl had this huge disgust over stray hairs. She would react in terror if there were more than a couple stray hairs on her desk. So, one day, when she's out of her seat in class and gossiping or something, he goes by her desk, is making a cover by talking to one of us about the assignment, and with a nervously suppressed grin, uses a pair of scissors to trim his hairy arm onto her desktop. When she sat back down after being told to, and notices a desk covered in stray hair, she ran out of the classroom, gagging and panicking like a small dog having a fit. Later that year, when a few of us were in his room during lunch, he showed us a bunch of pictures of his college friends and trips and stuff, and noticing a thumbnail, we get him to reluctantly open a picture of him in full US Army combat kit with a few other soldiers, standing in the turret of a tank in Afghanistan or Iraq. Can't remember which. He was the driver, and did a tour. Blew our minds. He was a solid guy, but he was always so dorky and earnest, and never acted anything like a soldier. It made me think, this guy probably went through so many pranks from his guys. He must have been itching to get back at this girl, and just couldn't hold back a kinda smallish prank on her to get the score even. Nobody gave him real grief after that, though. Ultimately, I think it was too unexpected for a teacher to learn and use our phobias to keep us in line if we pushed too hard. Like we were years behind him and fricking with people. Dude, that is the best way of establishing dominance I've ever heard. Totally non-violent, impossible to be punished for, extremely effective. Yeah, that's a military man all right. My high school had a Mexican Spanish teacher that barely spoke a word of English. Before finals week, a few kids told her there was a spider in her closet and locked her in when she checked. They then accessed her gradebook and changed everybody's grade to 1000%. Not a typo. She didn't notice and got fired. History teacher in middle school. The kids flooded the classroom so he would slip. Would interrupt lessons constantly with insults. Moved tables and chairs while he was talking so everyone was sitting with their backs to him. Would openly make fun of the way he spoke moved. Throughout all of that he kept being nice calm. Then, when he returned from a sabbatical that had him trapped while that tsunami happened in India, he was just changed. He came down hard on anyone who interrupted class. Detention. Parents invited, etc. Class grades dropped a lot too. After that. I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. I had a math teacher that, as I'm now an adult, I have so much respect for. It was 6th grade and all we did as a class was raise heck. Nothing insane, just a lot of obnoxious stuff. A few of the things we did were having eraser fights and stealing all his chalk. He was a huge prude, so we'd find ways to work the number 69 into anything so he'd blush. It even got so bad with that number that one time when doing a math problem on the board he realized 5 minutes and that was going to be the answer and just said never mind and erased it. He'd change your grade if that's what it came out to as well. It got to the point that he'd sent kids to ISS just for saying it. Finally he'd always say throw me a bone guys when we were not getting it but should be. We all brought in dog treats for like a week waiting for him to say it, and when he did we all threw them at him. He actually laughed at that one though. He left for a different school after that year. His first year at my school. The thing is, no matter how bad we pushed him, he never screamed at us and never lost his cool. I was one of the worst, and the few times I actually needed help he really pulled through for me, and you could tell he absolutely cared so much. I actually ran into him later in life and had the opportunity to apologize for being such a little crap. He was super nice then too. Thanks Mr. W. You were one of the best teachers I had. I was the same way. I hope I find some of my old teachers. I'd really like to apologize. There's a teacher in my school that no one really likes, but some kid took it a little too far. He made a fake news article online and sent it to everyone. The article accused him of being a child molester. It blew up quicker than he anticipated, and people ratted on him because he wasn't the most liked kid either. The kid was brought into the office, wasn't seen for about 2-3 weeks, and the teacher hasn't been seen since. Pretty sure he was fired or quit. I don't know. It was pretty fricked up. I'll be honest, the teacher wasn't good at his job at all, and he wasn't too good with the kids, but being accused of molesting children, regardless of it being a joke, can ruin you. My wife's teacher had to step out of the room for something one day. A kid, ran downstairs and outside, and laid down under the open window. First though, he gave one of the drama kids a shoe. When the teacher came back, the actor kid, one of the best students, making it more believable, did his best cry on command and said something like, "I tried to pull him up." The class also did a great job of not giving it away. The teacher absolutely flipped out and ran out of the room and down to Dom. She was understandably pissed off when he turned out to be alive. No one got in trouble. I hope they at least did this to the drama teacher. That would have been incredible. Any other teacher, maybe not so much. There was this really rude, straight up Hitler girl in my grade who was always confrontational and would seek arguments and conflict with teachers. One of my favorite teachers had just lost his mother and was recently back from a leave of absence related to her passing. Hitler girl really picked her day, I guess, and she picked a fight with him over homework. The poor guy was so drained. He didn't even try arguing with her. At some point he talked back and she replied with, "How's your mom doing?" He sent her to the office and kept the class going, but there's no way that comment didn't frick him up. Boil her in oil. Our form tutor, also the Italian teacher, was very stylish and had a taste for expensive suits, one of which was a very pricey off-white Chanel number. One of the girls in my class broke open a red biro and smeared ink on the back of teacher's chair, so when she sat down it went all over her suit. She was absolutely gutted. Later we were asked to anonymously write on pieces of paper who had done it, or something else if we didn't want to say, and the culprit was pretty confident no one was going to grass her up. But apparently everyone wrote her name on their pieces of paper. At least justice was served in this case. Hope she was punished. In a just world, she should have had to work herself to the bone to replace that suit. Sex ed. Back in 5th grade. By sex education I mean they taught the boys about reproductive organs and the girls about periods. There were 3 5th grade teachers. 2 were very sweet, pretty mild in general. One was a B, but who knows what was going on in her life. She was just pretty blunt abrasive, which can be a little scary for 5th graders. Anyways, in hindsight, all 3 teachers actually did something really cool. They all talked fairly frankly about their own periods. It was pretty comforting, even though most of us had not gotten our own periods yet, to hear how different they can be and how that is totally okay. So the one mean teacher, we'll call her Ms. F, described that she used tampons without an applicator, and that she had a really heavy flow, and immediately all of the girls are giggling and whispering. I've never seen shame like the shame that played across Ms. F's face at that moment. She may have been terse, but she didn't deserve to feel gross or weird just because she had a heavy flow. It was heartbreaking to watch. Later on, I myself would be diagnosed with endometriosis, and I just think that if I ever had to speak in front of 5th grade girls, I'd want to be just as honest, and I hope that Ms. F knows she gave me comfort in sharing such honest words. To this day I still remember everything so clearly. Crazy. Obligatory. I can't help it that I have a heavy flow and a wide set vagina. But seriously, I don't think many people had teachers that were willing to do that. I know I didn't, and it would have been really comforting. It wasn't as bad as most of these, but in year 11 we had a very young maths teacher. He was only a few years older than us, and if you put him in a uniform he would have looked like a tall year 9. We used to mess with his head on a regular basis, but the things that stick out were: 1. Fairly early on he got pulled out of the classroom by the department head for about 10 minutes to deal with something. In that time we rearranged the classroom to be facing the opposite way, including his desk. 2. Every time he left the room after that, he would come back to a massive hairy dong taking up the entire whiteboard. 3. After he said we lacked imagination after the 20th or so time this happened, we switched to drawing a big vagina. 4. Once there was a note passed around the room to write, teacher's name, shaves his legs on a piece of paper and put it in the bin. After the first few people walked past him, he looked up to see a queue of 20 or so people. After he told us to stop messing around and get on with our work, he sneakily got one of the papers from the bin and read it. He wasn't best pleased. The worst part of it was, we were top set. Mr. Hendrickson. Very pale, very blonde, always wore very ugly sweaters. I believe he was my Spanish teacher during the 8th grade. Now, while my school wasn't located in an inner city environment, we were between two of our state's biggest cities, and so we got students from both cities attending, making the school's demographics interesting. Imagine your typical freedom writers type of school, without the uplifting teacher. Now, Mr. Hendrickson was literally the nicest guy, although a bit strange, but very caring and sweet nonetheless. That didn't stop every single class he had from relentlessly torturing him. There were classmates of mine that would literally tell him shut up, as he would open his mouth and the class would erupt in laughter. Students were physically touching him, pushing him, harassing him, making fun of his very high-pitched voice. You name it. You could see his spirit break every single day until one day he snapped. He yelled at everyone, and after a short silence, he once again was told to shut up, which was followed by hysterical laughter as usual. He broke. He eventually stopped writing students up, sending them out, anything along those lines. Started showing us movies instead of teaching. Even after all that, he was still voted to kiss a dead fish at a pep rally in front of the entire school. Honestly, I never felt so bad for a guy. I hope he's doing okay. This breaks my heart. My favorite teacher, who was a gay, and the students found out when she took her girlfriend to a basketball game. Everyone in my class was so mean, calling her a dyke under their breath and asking about her girlfriend in taunting ways. I was always really quiet and just observed, not ballsy enough to say anything. It felt terrible because she had pulled me aside several times asking if things were okay at home and became someone trusted to talk to, really going above and beyond. I actually looked her up not too long ago and emailed her and told her how much I remember and appreciated her as a teacher. It made me feel a lot better and hopefully had positive effects on her as well. Emailed her and told her how much I remember and appreciated her as a teacher. This melted my heart. More people should do this to their former teachers. I had a nice professor for my English class for my first semester in college. She was completely fair to everyone and explained anything other classmates didn't understand. However, there was one that was always a problem. Someone so lazy that she wouldn't do her homework, quizzes, tests, etc., and would just always cause trouble for the professor. When she comes into class one day about halfway into the semester, my professor told her that she was failing and there was no way to make a comeback. This led to both of them stepping out of the classroom to talk more while the rest of us just waited in class. We started hearing screaming and heard a thump noise after a few minutes. We ran to the door to see what happened and we found our professor on the floor crying. A couple of people went to find the classmate while the rest of us tried to comfort the professor. I've seen two male teachers break down in tears. One after he sat down on a chair that a little hooligan had completely covered the seat in PVA glue. Another when a student asked how many air holes were in the crate that his wife arrived in. Mail order bride. In middle school, my entire 7th grade village combined forces to pick on our English teacher. So the way our school worked was that students were all assigned to a village and rotated between 3 main teachers: English, science, and history. So our village had a total of around 60-70 students. She was an easy target because she had a noticeable Indian accent and students would pretend to not understand what she was saying. Also, she assigned a lot of homework. Honestly, it wasn't excessive. Students were just lazy. So the kids all started spreading rumors about how she assigned too much homework. They couldn't understand what she was saying. Total bulls. Her grammar was perfect and she was completely understandable. And someone claimed she said frick in class once and that spread until people said she swore in class. This was in a nice school district where not a lot of shady stuff happened, so our administration had nothing much to do. She ended up getting investigated so many times, and other teachers claimed they talked to her to reduce the homework load. There was this heavy implication that she was used to Indian standards of teaching and didn't quite understand the American way of teaching. By the end of the year, she was letting her students run everything because she was too scared to do anything that would annoy her students, which meant all our homework became optional and everyone basically got A's. I was just so disgusted with my class that year. Sorry Mrs. Sharma, you weren't a terrible teacher. All the Indian women I've run into in my small town, about 9,500 people, have been so nice, strict, but fair. Mrs. Sharma sounds lovely. Some of the kids in my school were actual pricks to the teachers, like the time a very overweight teacher fell down the stairs and was hospitalized, and everyone just made jokes about the floor being broken. But all the stuff I personally saw or took part in was just playful crap. We had this physics teacher who said the word pixels a lot when we were covering resolution and such, and I mean a lot. So one day before he made it to class we wrote it in tiny letters on every inch of the board. There was another thing with the same teacher where we hid in a supply closet before he got to the classroom. We were in that room the period before but the teachers swapped between periods and he spent ages running around looking for us. And when he got back we all pretended nothing had happened. Okay, those last two are pretty funny. I mean if I was a teacher I would break down giggling at those. I was in a Japanese program growing up, and in 7th grade our class had this Japanese teacher who was just awful. She had no control over the classroom and was a horrible teacher. Most of the boys in our class in particular were terrible in the class, and left her in tears several times because they would talk over her, play games blatantly during class, etc. When she wasn't crying, she also fell asleep in class several times, and by the end of the year the administration finally started looking into it and found out she wasn't actually certified to work at an accredited school, and thus she was dismissed at the end of the year. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.